Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sangham namasami. Dear friends, this is the very last day of the Vesak season for us. And I thought it would be beautiful if we would look at the part of the Mahaparinibbana Sutta that's describing the last day of the Buddha's human life. I'm going to be reading for you. I guess I will be sharing the screen so that you can read along with me. This is in the middle of the Sutta number 16 in the long discourses. And the chapter that we're going to look at starts here. It's called the pair of sal trees. This is the flowering tree where the Buddha had passed away. Then the Buddha said to Ananda, "Come, Ananda, let's go to the far shore of the Golden River and onto the sal forest of the Malas at Upavatana near Kusinara." "Yes, sir," Ananda replied. That's where they went. Then the Buddha addressed Ananda. "Please, Ananda, set up a cot for me between the twin sal trees with my head to the north. I am tired and will lie down." "Yes, sir," replied Ananda, and did as he was asked. Then the Buddha laid down in the lion's posture on the right side, placing one foot on top of the other, mindful and aware. This is recommended for a very serious practitioner or meditator, instead of just sleeping in any old way, taking that lion's posture and trying to sleep mindfully, keeping that one posture. Now, at that time, the twin sal trees were in full blossom with flowers out of season. They sprinkled and bestrewed the realized one's body in honor of the realized one. And the flowers of the heavenly flame tree fell from the sky, and they too sprinkled and bestrewed the realized one's body in honor of the realized one. And heavenly sandalwood powder fell from the sky, and it too sprinkled and bestrewed the realized one's body in honor of the realized one. And heavenly music played in the sky in honor of the realized one. And heavenly choirs sang in the sky in honor of the realized one. Then the Buddha pointed out to Ananda what was happening, adding, "That's not how the realized one is honored, respected, revered, venerated, and esteemed. Any monk or nun, or male or female lay follower who practices in line with the teachings, practicing properly, living in line with the teachings, they honor, respect, revere, venerate, and esteem the realized one with the highest honor. So too, Ananda, you should train like this. We shall practice in line with the teachings, practicing properly, living in line with the teachings." And the Pali, there's a phrase that's derived from this exchange in the suttas. We say, Dhamma nu Dhamma patipatiya Buddhang pujami. Dhamma nu Dhamma patipatiya Dhammang pujami. Dhamma nu Dhamma patipatiya Sanghang pujami. So Dhamma nu Dhamma is the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, or the Dhamma in accordance with the way it was taught by the Buddha. And then patipati is practicing. And then Buddha Dhamma Sangha Pujami means giving veneration to the Triple Gem. So this here is sort of giving a contrast between the Buddhists who are more like faith-oriented or devotional-oriented, who find that it's very meaningful to circumambulate the temple, carrying sweet-smelling incense, to bow with their bodies in front of the Buddha, to bring flowers and beautiful offerings, and to set them in front of the image of the Buddha. And there's a bit of a, I guess we could say, a trend in modern Buddhism that throughout, I could say, most of the 20th century, especially when Westerners met Buddhism, and when there was a kind of a reformation in Buddhism as a result of the interaction between Christian missionary culture and Buddhist culture. And at that point, there was an idea that Buddhism is kind of scientific and rational, that emphasizes meditation, emphasizes that the Dhamma is something that, the Buddha is saying, come and see. And if you do this, follow this path and look within yourself, you can discover and you can realize your own happiness, your own liberation from that. But all of it was emphasizing during this kind of Reformation period that it's scientific and rational. And so then these devotional practices were, by some people, kind of like looked down on, saying that the devotion is inferior to studying and meditating. And that could be caught up in sort of a racist Orientalism that thinks that the European way of understanding Buddhism is better than the way the Asian bhikkhus were understanding it. But actually, it doesn't just have to be read as being racist like that. But in the recent, like in the 21st century, there's been a turn in Western scholarship about Buddhism, and a much more respect for the oral traditions and the way things have been handed down within the culture of the Buddhist countries, and more open appreciation that the devotional practices and all the other explicitly religious sides of Buddhism are valid, just as the meditation is, just as using your mind to listen and understand and gain insight. We see here that this dichotomy between devotion and meditation is not just something that happened in the modern times. Even in the sutta, this contrast is being set up. And as we see in a lot of different places in the suttas, the Buddha brings out something that's kind of like mythological. Last time, when we were talking about the sutta on the lion's roar, we were looking at the divine eye and the being able to go to have the magic powers and so forth as one of the Buddha's powers. And then the second set was about the Buddha's insight. And in a certain way, it seemed like the mythological powers were set up as like a contrast. Like there's all these magic powers, but the insight and the practice is even greater than that. And so here in this sutta, we see exactly the same pattern. It's a kind of a literary device that the sal trees are raining down their flowers. The flowers are falling down from heaven. The heavenly music is going, but all of those things are less significant for veneration of the Buddha than if a bhikkhu, a bhikkhuni, or a layman or a laywoman would practice the Dhamma according to how the Buddha taught it, that would be the highest veneration. So the mythological element is being skillfully used as a sort of a setup to what the Buddha is saying is truly the most important. And even if you talk to traditional Buddhists in Buddhist countries, very often you will hear people saying, yes, meditation is really very central to the practice and everybody should meditate more. And it's too bad that people just think of doing puja when they ought to be practicing meditation. So this is something that's universal throughout the history of Buddhism. It's not just something that arose because of the encounter between Western cultures and the Buddhist cultures. Dhamma Nudhamma Patipatiya means to practice the entire Eightfold Path and not to neglect any part of it. So if someone practices meditation without morality, they are not practicing correctly. If they try to understand wisdom without meditation, they're not practicing according to what the Buddha taught. So in the Buddha's teaching, there's not any part of the Eightfold Noble Path which is not an essential part of his teaching, an essential part of the practice. I think I may pause for a moment here and see if there's any questions about this story or any comments about this story. And if not, I will proceed. Now, here's the story about the Venerable Upavana. He was sort of the, Ananda was the chief attendant, and Upavana was the assistant to the chief attendant who had been serving the Buddha for a long time. Venerable Upavana was attending on the Buddha and fanning him. Then the Buddha told him to move. He said, move over, mendicant, don't stand in front of me. Now, if you had a chance to serve the Buddha, the Sammasambuddha, And then at the very last moment, he said, move over, don't stand in front of me. How would you feel? So Ananda thought, this Bhavana has been the attendant for a long time, yet in his final hour, the Buddha makes him move. Why? And what is the cause, the reason for that? Then Ananda asked about it. And the Buddha said, most of the deities from the 10 solar systems have gathered to see the realized one. For 12 leagues all around this sal grove, there's no spot, not even the fraction of a hair's tip, that's not crowded full of illustrious deities. The deities are complaining. We came such a long way to see the realized one. Only rarely do realized ones arise in the world, perfected ones, fully awakened Buddhas. This very day, in the last watch of the night, the realized one will become fully extinguished. And this illustrious mendicant is standing in front of the Buddha, blocking the view. We won't get to see the realized one in his final hour. And then he describes the deities, both in the sky and on the earth, who are percipient of the earth. And these deities, with hair disheveled and arms raised, they fall down like their feet were chopped off, rolling back and forth and lamenting. Too soon the Blessed One will become fully extinguished. Too soon the Holy One will become fully extinguished. Too soon the seer will vanish from the world. But those deities who are free of desire endure, mindful and aware, thinking, conditions are impermanent. How could it possibly be otherwise? This theme is going to come back again within this very reading in terms of those bhikkhus and lay people who are calm and mindful, and those ones who are carried away with distress. It certainly has to be true, doesn't it, that if there were a Sama Sambuddha in the world who had been teaching for 50 years, more than 50 years being in the world, and we came accustomed to being in a world that had a Buddha, so that anytime there was a question or a doubt, one could always go to the Buddha and have it resolved, have it taken care of. And then just the fantastic quality of having such a person in the world would have so many repercussions. And then we feel quite sure that the departure of the Buddha was a traumatic kind of a loss, and that many decades after that were spent by the Sangha and the people trying to come to an adjustment about how can we practice without having the presence of a living Buddha among us. And we may again come back to that in a little while. Now we have the 4 inspiring places. Previously, sir, when mendicants had completed the rainy season residence in various districts, they came to see the Blessed One. We got to see the esteemed mendicant and pay homage to them. But when the Buddha has passed, we won't get to see the esteemed mendicant or pay homage to him. Ananda, a faithful gentleman, should go to see these 4 inspiring places. What for? Thinking, here the realized one was born. That is an inspiring place. That would be Lumbini. I'm getting, my signal is breaking up. Here the realized one became awakened as the supreme, fully awakened Buddha. That is an inspiring place. Here, The supreme wheel of Dhamma was rolled forth by the realized one. That is an inspiring place. And finally, here the realized one became fully extinguished through the natural principle of extinguishment without anything left over. That is an inspiring place. These are the 4 inspiring places that the faithful gentleman should go to see. Faithful monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen will come and think, here the realized one was born. Here he became awakened as the supreme fully awakened Buddha. Here the supreme wheel of Dhamma was rolled forth. Here the realized one became fully extinguished through the natural principle of extinguishment without anything left over. Anyone who passes away while on pilgrimage to these shrines will, when their body breaks up after death, be reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. So even today, we recommend that if health and conditions allow, to go and visit these inspiring places. Can be a deep and transformative experience for many. We know that when the Europeans were in the process of colonizing India, they had the idea that the Buddha was a myth, that it was all a mythology. And then archaeologists found the Asoka's pillar, which King Asoka, probably one of the greatest secular rulers in the history of humanity, had established pillars in many different places with writings on them, with different Dhamma teachings. And the pillar at Lumbini said, here the Buddha was born at this time. So those pillars were put up 300 years after the Buddha had passed away. And they would have been discovered by the English archaeologists 2,200 years later. And with that, the Western world came to realize that the Buddha was a human being, he was a man. And I think this is one of the things that is the most both touching the heart and kind of transformative for our own idea about our own possibilities. If we know that what the Buddha accomplished was accomplished by a human being. And so with the Buddha showing the way, how much the more it's possible for us to accomplish what he predicted as far as our own awakening. So any questions along the way, please raise your hand or put something in the chat, and then I'll pause and we can take a question. But otherwise, I'm going to kind of like move along with this reading. Okay, Damon.
So with regard to your comment just about how inspiring it is to know that there was a historical Buddha who was awakened. Are we presuming that there are awakened beings walking amongst us now on the earth?
Yes. I personally, and when we speak about awakening, it's said that there are 4 stages of awakening. The stage of stream entry, the stage of what's called a once returner, somebody who's going to be reborn one more time. The stage of a non-returner, somebody who will, after this life, go to a heavenly realm, and from the heavenly realm go to enlightenment, go to the full extinguishment. And then the Arahant, for whom this is the very last life. We there are many, many thousands of stream enterers in the world. I'm sure of it. Maybe hundreds of thousands of stream enterers in the world. I'm quite sure of it. And correspondingly, many other awakened people. Those people have gotten, like the Dhamma eye has opened, they've had a realization that becomes irreversible in seeing the way forward to Nibbana, and then they become what's called a trainee, and they would have the chance to devote the remainder of their life to work out whatever remains that needs to be worked out for their full awakening. And if not in the one life, at least in a subsequent life, so that they're on the road that's going that way and not reversing. Then the attitude we have about the fully awakened arahants is it's against the rule for a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni to brag to lay people about their noble attainments. So you won't hear directly from a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni saying, I am enlightened, except that I don't have a clip, but I remember a moment when my teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, was being recorded for video, a teaching video, and he was making fun of people who brag about it. And he said, they go like this. And he put his hand up and he says, I am enlightened. And I was like so horrified, because I said, somebody's going to just clip that 1 second from Bhante's talk and take it out of context and put it on a video. All right, you can do it. You can put me out. And what I feel is that there are fully enlightened arahants who are not public teachers, who are not interested in being on YouTube, and who may not speak English and may not be particularly interested in English. There's one place I heard of that has a reputation like that, and they are not just, they're not interested in foreigners, they're not interested in having Buddhists from the cities like Colombo and so forth to visit them, because they're way back in the country and they want to stay secluded and private like that. And then in other cultures, like, well, in the Thai culture particularly, and other Asian cultures, there's more of a faith in the possibility of a fully enlightened arahant, and in part because the faithful people can recognize that possibility, that then there are teachers who are reputed to be arahants. If you get a chance to meet an arahant in this lifetime, it would be good luck for you, because if you're not ready, you can listen to them and it won't touch you at all. But if you're ready, it could touch your heart and have a deep effect. However, I'll also say that our culture is very opposite to the Buddhist culture, and I think it's more difficult for us to awaken because we're addicted to our computers now, and we're addicted to falsehood and lies in a way that perhaps in the olden days, when people had to learn things by being in front of another human and listening to another human, and when their life included many hours of the day just walking as a way of getting around and being so much closer to nature, and when nature was in better repair than it is now, I feel like circumstances might have made it easier to wake up than in our modern culture today. Is that enough? Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead with Ananda's questions. Now this next part, don't get mad, because it's a little bit upsetting to see this next section. Ananda asked, Sir, how do we proceed when it comes to females? And the answer given is, without seeing Ananda, but seeing how to proceed. And the answer, without getting into conversation, Ananda. The question, when in a conversation, how do we proceed? Be mindful, Ananda. Now, first of all, the scholars think that because of the grammar of this passage, that it could be a later interpolation. And in addition, in some of the other versions that exist in different languages than Pali, this passage does not exist. And that's another reason why the scholars think that this could have been a later interpolation. And then it's in a sort of a contrast with what the Buddha taught elsewhere. Here's another passage. I think there's one in the Anguttara Nikaya, and I have one here in the Sutta Nikaya. It's about women, what to do. The question is, there are these young monks who are youthful, black-haired, blessed with youth in the prime of life. They've never played around with sensual pleasures. What is the cause? What is the reason why they practice the full, pure spiritual life as long as they live, maintaining it for a long time? Then it's because they have this advice. Please, monks, think of women your mother's age as your mother. Think of women your sister's age as your sister. And think of women your daughter's age as your daughter. This is the cause. And they say, yes, but what if their mind is wanton or full of lust? Even sometime a thought of desire comes up for a woman, the mother's age, the sister's age, or the daughter's age. And ask if there's another reason. And then the second teaching given in this context is for the monks to examine their own body from the soles of the feet up and down to the tips of the hairs as being wrapped in skin and full of many kinds of filth. Head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, undigested food, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, and urine. And then later they added the very last one after urine is brain. So that's another reason. And I actually know this very much for a fact that persons who are really struggling because of like sex addiction or love addiction, they may not know about this teaching, but they make them volunteer in hospice or in hospital or in the older folks' home, where they have to spend time with people, seeing how the body decomposes and gets sick and falls apart. And the kind of the potential for true love that's completely separated from lust is able to emerge in this way, that you love somebody, even if you have to wipe their diaper. You know, you love them, but it's in a different context. So that's the second powerful teaching for doing this. And then the last teaching is the guarding of the senses when they see a sight with the eyes, not to be caught up in the features and details. And then being basically cautious, especially when there's a pleasant, delightful, and beautiful encounter, to have your mind conditioned. So Abel goes on and says, danger, danger. Let me be aware that all things are impermanent, and not to let my mind be obsessed and carried away with whatever the detail is that's pleasing. And so in these cases, it becomes clear that the Buddha is advising the monks that they can see women and they can talk with women. So it's opposite to what we heard in the sutta that we've been reading. That's another reason we think that may be an interpolation from later on. So the next question is, how do we proceed when it comes to the realized one's corpse? And the Buddha's answer: don't get involved in the rites for venerating the realized one's corpse, Ananda. Please, Ananda, you must all strive and practice for your own goal. Meditate, diligent, keen, and resolute for your own goal. There are astute aristocrats, Brahmins, and householders who are devoted to the realized one. They will perform the rites for venerating the realized one's corpse. But sir, how to proceed when it comes to the realized one's corpse? And now he's describing a proceeding in the same way as I do for the corpse of a wheel-turning monarch. That's the greatest accomplishment in rulership, is to be a wheel-turning monarch, the most powerful and accomplished kind of a king. They wrap the monarch's corpse with unworn cloth, then with uncarded cotton, then again with unworn cloth. In this way, they wrap the corpse with 500 double layers. Then they place it in an iron case filled with oil and close it up with another case. Then, having built a funeral pyre out of all kinds of fragrant substances, they cremate the corpse. They build a monument for the wheel-turning monarch at the crossroads. That's how they proceed with the wheel-turning monarch's corpse. Proceed in the same way with the realized one's corpse. A monument for the realized one is to be built at the crossroads. When someone there lifts up garlands or fragrance or powder or bows or inspires confidence in their heart, that will be for their lasting welfare and happiness. In Buddhism, Buddhist culture, the monastics haven't necessarily stayed completely with this advice towards their own revered and greatly accomplished teachers and leaders. When senior monks pass away, there's a great to-do, and there's a big cremation, and thousands and thousands of faithful people will go to be present. And then we could hear stories about how there's certain solar phenomenon that happened during the cremation, and people talk about this as evidence of the enlightenment of the deceased teacher, the great guru. And then they go through what's remaining after the end of the cremation and pull out there's some remaining little bits that may be little bits of bone, or could be the liquid parts of the body sort of coagulate into could look like a clear tiny pearl or something like that. And so those remains are very treasured and valued and kept and worshipped afterwards as a way of remembering and feeling our connection with those elders that have gone before us. And then the Buddhist monks also are very often asked to assist in the funerals of lay people who have passed away, and to do the chanting for them. So much so that sometimes they have to set a limit on it, or else they would be spending all day, every day, doing nothing but funerals. Here at Dhammadharini, we try, if we can, to get a picture of deceased people who are known to us, who wish to be remembered and blessed. And we very regularly chant the recollections for the dead, what's done at a memorial service, but we're just doing it for all the people within the time frame that have any kind of connection to us, but not to the extent of well, it can help us to know that all things are impermanent, which is the bottom line. And so we're a specialist in the services for the deceased because we know that all things are permanent. Everything that arises must pass away, and with their ceasing is bliss. And because we know that, we can give comfort at the time of loss, and because we're in contact with those who are dying and those who have died, then it helps us to develop our own wisdom, to overcome our own greed, and to develop our own asabha practices I described before about overcoming lust by being and seeing the reality. So this is the Buddhist method of remembering a death. Then we come to the persons worthy of monument. There are 4 persons worthy of a monument. What for? A realized one, a perfected one, a fully awakened Buddha. That's the first one. Second, a Buddha awakened for themselves. That's called a private Buddha. They've awakened, but they don't have the skill to teach the Dhamma in a way that the Dhamma becomes well established in the world and survives for a long time. And then a disciple of the realized one. And the last is a wheel turning monarch. And they are worthy of monument, so that many people will inspire confidence in their hearts, thinking this is the monument for that blessed one, perfected and awakened. Having done so, when their body breaks up, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. And the similar for the private Buddha, and similar for a realized one's disciple. Many people will inspire confidence in their hearts, thinking this is a monument to that blessed one's disciple. And having done so, when their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. Isn't it interesting? The Buddha doesn't look down on heaven. Even though we know that heaven is not the goal of the Sammasambuddha, or the goal of one who's practicing, aiming for full awakening, for full enlightenment. They are aiming for this to be the last life, no more rebirth. And yet, the kind of life which is conducive to heaven, the life which is filled with good ethics, good faith, good loving kindness and compassion that balanced and sane life, and the life which is really aiming for a purification of the mind, is putting us on the track to gain the capacity for insight, to receive and be able to comprehend the Four Noble Truths, and to have the potential to hear the deep, essential, central teachings of the Buddha. So it is very often described that a person may come to Buddhism because they're a miserable, wretched, unskillful person who's suffering terribly. And because they suffer so much, they're just looking, they want to get out of hell and they want to get out of their suffering. But a person who's in that kind of a position, whose mind is very disturbed and has got a lot of negative, harmful habits, a person who might even experience that, like their own mind is toxic, like the poison is within, like my thoughts are poisoning me, and I don't know how to get rid of these bad thoughts. I don't know how to control them, and so on. So somebody like that. So the way of teaching is first get them away from hell and get them up to heaven. And then once they're like purified that far, settled down, calm, even able to let go of all the 5 hindrances and to reach a calm and beautiful meditation, being temporarily free of the hindrances. And then at that point, without disturbance, they're able to look at their life and see how it actually is, without getting swept away with disturbances. And that's then when they're ready to hear and start to practice with the profound teachings of the Buddha. Now we come to Ananda's incredible qualities. Ananda entered a dwelling. This could have been, they were in the middle of a vacant place in the forest, but they put something up, some building up for the, related to the funeral services coming. He was leaning against the door jamb and crying, "Oh, I'm still only a trainee with work left to do, and my teacher is about to become fully extinguished. He was so kind to me." Then the Buddha said to the monks, "Monks, where is Ananda?" "Sir, Ananda has entered a dwelling. He stands there leaning against the door jamb crying." "Oh, I'm only a trainee with work left to do. My teacher about to become fully extinguished. He was so kind to me." So the Buddha sent for Ananda and had Ananda to come. And now the Buddha scolds Ananda first, and then he comforts him. He says, "Enough, Ananda, don't grieve, do not lament. Did I not prepare you for this when I explained that we must be parted and separated from all we hold dear and beloved? How could it possibly be so that what is born, created, conditioned, and liable to fall apart should not fall apart, even the realized one's body?" So that's the harsh part. Now comes the comfort. "For a long time, Ananda, you've treated the realized one with deeds of body, speech, and mind that are loving, beneficial, pleasant, wholehearted, and limitless. You've done good deeds, Ananda. Devote yourself to meditation, and you will soon be free of defilements." That means that he will be fully enlightened. And then the Buddha said to the mendicants, "The Buddhas of the past or the future have had attendants who are no better than Ananda is for me. Ananda is astute. He is intelligent. He knows the time for monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, kings, ministers, religious founders, and disciples of religious founders to visit the realized one. He says, these are the four incredible and amazing things about Ananda. Now, this is calling to mind the Acharya Sutta and many other suttas where Ananda and the other monks are talking about the amazing, incredible qualities of the Buddha. And now he's boosting Ananda up and says, you also have these amazing qualities. So it's like when the Buddha says, you are the light, rely on yourself. If you think that I'm no better than a piece of dirt under the fingernail of the Buddha, then how can you rely on yourself? But if you understand, yes, you have these qualities, you have these potentials, then you can look within and rely on yourself. There's a comment that there are no enlightened people, only enlightened actions. Correct, because the person, the individual, the ego, is disappearing with enlightenment. So, like the statement with enlightenment is, everything has been done, there's no more work to be done. And then there's a question about the wheel-turning monarch. There's a mythology about the wheel-turning monarch having having great powers, like they have a divine wealth, and they have a divine counselor, they have a divine bookkeeper, they have these different. They have a divine horse. I can't quite remember all the treasures because it's not in my mind for now, but there's another sutta that is going to be referenced here in a few minutes called Sudassana Sutta, which is talking about the Buddha in a previous lifetime when he was a wheel-turning monarch, and had all of these incredible powers. So it's a mythological statement that has the marks are the signs and symbols, the symbols of the power of this kind of a great monarch. Now, here are the four qualities about Ananda. If an assembly of monks goes to see Ananda, they're uplifted by seeing him and uplifted by hearing him speak. And when he falls silent, they've never had enough. The same for an assembly of nuns, laymen, and laywomen. So the four miracles are that these four kinds of people are uplifted by seeing him, uplifted by hearing him. When he falls silent, they've never had enough. These are the four incredible and amazing things. So, skill in teaching, to be able to teach different kinds of people is a very great skill indeed, because different people need different types of teaching, depending on where they're at or where they come from culturally or what their level of maturity is. And then he mentions these four incredible and amazing things about a wheel-turning monarch. If an assembly of aristocrats goes to see a wheel-turning monarch, they're uplifted by seeing him, by hearing him speak. And when he falls silent, they've never had enough. The same for an assembly of Brahmins, householders, or ascetics. All the kinds of people are uplifted by hearing him speak. I'm not sure if any of us had a chance to meet the king or the queen of any particular country, or if you had a chance to meet the president of a particular country, but it does happen sometimes that people can be like really awestruck because of the power of the position, and there's a kind of like a magic in that. But if a person like lives up to the role and fulfills the role, by having all those great qualities of both the clarity of mind and the compassion and knowing the right thing at the right time, then the traditional power of the role is compounded with the personal qualities of the individual. And now he's teaching a discourse on Mahasudassana. This is the wheel-turning monarch before the Buddha's time, which you can read about in the long discourses. It's really a weird and wonderful sutta. So Ananda then said to the Buddha, "Sir, please don't become fully extinguished in this little hamlet." This is Kusinara, where they are. This jungle hamlet, this branch hamlet. There are other great cities such as Kampa, Rajaga, Savatthi, Saketa, Kosambi, Benares. Let the Buddha become fully extinguished here. There are many well-to-do aristocrats, Brahmins, and householders there who are devoted to the Buddha. They will perform the rites of venerating the realized one's corpse. And the Buddha answers, "Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. This is a little hamlet, a jungle hamlet, a branch hamlet. Once upon a time, there was a king named Mahasudassana, who was a wheel-turning monarch, a just and principled king. His dominion extended to all four sides. He achieved stability in the country. He possessed the 7 treasures. His capital was this Kusinara, which at that time was named Kusavati. It stretched for 12 leagues from east to west, 7 leagues from north to south. The royal capital was successful, prosperous, populous, full of people with plenty of food. It was just like Alakamanda, the royal capital of the gods, which is successful, prosperous, populous, full of spirits, with plenty of food. Kusavati was never free of 10 sounds by day or night: the sound of elephants, horses, chariots, drums, clay drums, arched harps, singing horns, gongs, and handbells, and the cry, "Eat, drink, be merry," as the 10th. So then he says, "Go, Ananda, into Kusinara and inform the Malas there this very day. Alasetas, in the last watch of the night, the Blessed One will become fully extinguished." So this is another kind of a parallel between King Sudassana and his wife, who was beautiful and beloved. The king became interested in meditation and gave up the pomp of kingship and retired into the palace that he had built for meditation. And then he announced to his wife that he was going to die. And she also grieved and lamented and said, please don't leave. And then he gave his wife the same teaching about everything is impermanent. Didn't I tell you this? What arises will pass away. And so in this way, Ananda is sort of in a parallel role to the beloved and dear wife of King Sudassana. I'm going to read you another poem about King Sudassana, about the generosity that he practiced, which should help you to understand why giving can be so beautiful and so joyful. This is what he said. When I was the Lord of Earth, my name was Sudassana the Great, a wheel-turning monarch of great power. And I said, who needs what? Who wants what? To whom ought riches be given? Who needs an umbrella? Who is thirsty? What person, being naked, will put on colorful clothes? Who will take an umbrella on a highway? Who needs sandals, soft and pretty? Thus I had it proclaimed everywhere, morning and night, and not just in 10 places or even 100, but many 100 places. Riches were prepared for supplicants by day or night, If a nomad comes, then having gotten all he wants, he leaves with full hands. For my whole life, I did not give because I disliked riches or because I had a store set aside. Suppose a person is sick. In order to be free of sickness, having compensated the doctor with money, they become free from sickness. In order to fulfill without remainder, I gave gifts to nomads without clinging or reward for the attainment of awakening. So his thought, his meditation was for awakening, which at the deepest level is letting go of attachment, letting go of any kind of acquisition at the deepest psychological level. And that's symbolized with the generosity of giving, not just giving what's left over, not just giving something that's sort of good enough, but actually giving the best, giving the best you have, giving freely without any limitation. And so that's like one of the perfections that was developed by the Bodhisattva when he was when he was in his incarnation as that king. So I'll just continue a little bit longer. So they invite the Vasatas to come. They come and pay homage. Ananda makes the announcement. He says, don't regret it later, thinking he was fully extinguished in our own village, but we didn't get a chance to see him in the final hour. They all came, so many of them, distraught, sad, grief-stricken, hair disheveled, arms raised, falling down like their feet were chopped off, rolling back and forth. This is just the way that some of the gods were. So soon he's becoming fully extinguished. And Ananda thought, if I have to then pay homage one by one, they won't be finished before the first light. I better separate them family by family and let them pay homage in groups. And so he does that. They pay homage in groups. Then along comes Subhata, the wanderer. He was near Kusinara. He just happened to wander by. And he realized that the Buddha is about to become fully extinguished. He thought, I heard that Brahmins of the past who were elderly, seeing teachers of teachers, said only rarely do realized ones arise in the world, perfected, fully awakened. But a state of uncertainty has come in me. I'm quite confident that the Buddha is capable of teaching me so I can give up this state of uncertainty. Then Subhata goes to the sal grove and approached, and Ananda says, he said, I've heard he's the teacher of teachers, that he can answer my doubts. And Ananda turns him away. And he's begging to be able to see the Asada Gautama. And Ananda saying, enough, Reverend, do not trouble the realized one. He's tired. For a second time, for a third time. Then the Buddha heard the discussion and he said, enough, Ananda, don't obstruct Subhata. Whatever he asks, he's only looking for understanding, not trouble. So Subhata came. He went and exchanged greetings, sat down to one side, said to the Buddha, first he gives a long-winded preamble, so typical, about all of the other great monks. I met this monk, I met that monk, I went to this teacher, I went to this teacher. Now I have this is, so I've known students like that, very long-winded. According to their own claims, did all of them have direct knowledge or none of them or only some? And the Buddha says, enough, let it be. I teach you only the Dhamma. Listen closely, I will speak. Subhada says, yes, sir. Subhada, training, a noble there ascetic found, no second ascetic, no third ascetic, and so on. Whatever teaching or training, the Noble Eightfold Path is found. There is a true ascetic found, a second ascetic, a third ascetic, and a fourth ascetic. In this teaching and training, the Noble Eightfold Path is found. Only here is there a true ascetic. Were these mendicants to practice well, the world would not be empty of perfected ones. I was 29 years of age, Subhada, when I went forth to discover what is skillful. It's been over 50 years since I went forth. I am the one who points out the proper teaching. Outside of here, there is no true ascetic. Were these mendicants to practice well, the world would not be empty of perfected ones. And then Subhada says, excellent, sir, excellent. It's as if he was writing what was overturned, revealing the hidden, pointing out the path that is lost, lighting a lamp in the dark. So many people with good eyes can see the Buddha teaching in so many ways. I go for refuge to the Buddha, to the teaching, and to the mendicant Sangha. Then he requests for ordination. And because he was in another sect order, the Buddha requires him to have a 4-month probation before he gets his full ordination. That's one of our Vinaya rules. That Subhada does go forth, and he's the last person, the last human to have gotten ordination directly from getting his going forth directly from the Buddha. The Buddha said to Ananda, Ananda gives Subhada the going forth. So I'm going to skip ahead because the time is short, and I want to just come to when he was fully extinguished. And here's another little poem. This is what the Brahma Sahampati recited. After the Buddha became fully extinguished, there was a great earthquake, awe-inspiring, hair-raising. Thunder cracked the sky. And the Brahma, this is the God, said, all creatures in this world must lay down this bag of bones, for even a teacher such as this, unrivaled in the world, the realized one, attained to power. The Buddha became fully extinguished. And then the second God, Saka, the Lord of the gods, recited this verse. Oh, conditions are impermanent. Their nature is to rise and fall. Having arisen, they cease. Their stilling is true bliss. That's the final cessation, when it's ceased and not arising again. Then Venerable Anuruddha said, there was no more breathing for the poised one of steady heart, imperturbable, committed to peace. The sage has done his time. He put up with painful feelings without flinching. The liberation of his heart was like the extinguishing of a lamp. So this is the last, a part of the last day of the Buddha, which I'm reading to you here on the last day of the Vesak month. I'm sorry that my personally, I am so small, not able to fully manifest or embody in just heart and mind the power, the importance, and the significance of this. So I just depend on the Buddha's words, on the teachings that were passed down to us through the tradition to give us a glimpse of this actual human being who accomplished so much and has caused so much transformation for those in that time and for so many through all of the thousands of years since the Buddha's Parinibbana. So there's just a few minutes left before 2:30, and I'm happy to hear if anybody else would be willing to share their own reflection or question about this teaching or about the Buddha's passing. Okay, Sheila, thank you.
Thank you, Aya. In some of my readings, I've heard the first watch, second watch, third watch of the night of the Buddha's extinguishment. And it appears that there are still many more discourses or suttas within this chapter. What occurs, or the theme during the third watch, which I would imagine is when there is full extinguishment, or is that a period afterwards?
Well, even apart from this particular occasion, the watches of the night was the way the time was divided for meditation. So from, is it from 8 o'clock to midnight? No.
10 to 2 to 6, 6 to 10, like 4 hour segments.
10 p.m. until 2 a.m.
That's the sleeping part.
Is the time when we sleep. And then from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. is that that's the third watch, right? So we meditate in the first watch of the night from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock. Then we sleep from 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock. Then normally we would meditate from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock. And again from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, well, dawn would be coming during that time frame. So that's so then the references to what was happening in the watches of the night is simply linking the history into the dimension of human time. The Buddha attained, after he had practiced the different levels of the jhana, sequentially going up and down, and then come to his last breath and the final extinguishment. That was the finish for him. And then the remaining chapters in the sutta are talking about the early history of what the people were doing following the Buddha's parinibbana. They had the cremation and the observances, and then the remains of the Buddha were divided up among the great kings, and then we started a culture that then became a key part of the Buddhist culture, which is the relics of the Buddha. It's a kind of a physical token of how Buddhism is established in different lands. And so those relics kept getting divided into smaller and smaller pieces as Buddhism was spreading, so that then if you have, like in a temple in a new country, a reliquary with an actual relic of the Buddha, then you think that this is like the presence of real Buddhism, and that's how Buddhism, how the sasana comes to be established. And now we know that the Buddha told us that Dhamma, Dhamma, Patipatiya, Buddham Pujami, that this is how Buddhism is established in a country when people are practicing according to the Dhamma. Even when we came out here to California, one of the first Bhikkhunis who obtained the full ordination here in California, she's not a tribal member, but her grandmother could have been a tribal member of the Miwok had she chosen to register, but she didn't choose to do so. But anyway, she's related to the indigenous people of this exact place. And so then when she got her ordination as a bhikkhuni, it was like, we have somebody who's got, the actual part of the blood of the indigenous people of this place who has undertaken this teaching. And that's a certain way in which we say then that Buddhism has landed or established in a new country. But symbolically, the presence of relics is a very important focal point for the establishment of the Dhamma in different places in the world. And if you happen to visit the most probably the most reliably authentic relics you could find in the museum in India, and be in the presence of the physical relic of this actual human being who was the Sammasambuddha, it can have that effect.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the historical context that you bring to what appears to be, a novice's question. So to get a full context and historical perspective was really very helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. During the coming weeks, we will be shifting our focus to back to more basic practices, and thinking about Paccavekkhana, or reviewing the mind, developing mindfulness and clear comprehension at all times. And then also coming to grips with the nutriments of life, the things that we got to have in order to live, and how we can balance the fact that we are humans that are made of all of those things, the skin, teeth, nails, bones, down to urine and brains, that this is the life that we've got to have. How can we balance that existence based in flesh and the mind that goes along with that, with our highest spiritual aspirations and training for liberation. So all of those things are coming up in the future. I hope that all of us can practice the Dhamma in accord with the teachings. Let's close out by paying homage to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supartipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the end.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aya.
Saya.